Thank you. Awesome. Well, I am super excited to be chatting with you guys today. If you guys haven't met me previously at an event before, I'm Elizabeth. I am a technical recruiter. I do recruiting for engineering and any and every kind of IT job, and with Mosaic Personnel. I've been coming to different Techlahoma events for about a year, so that's a little bit about me. And I am feet first in the recruiting world, talking to candidates all day, every day, and I conduct a lot of interviews and talk to hiring managers in different tech spaces that do a lot of interviews. So I'm gonna tackle and hopefully give you guys some insight on nailing your next interview. No one loves to do an interview. They're kind of nerve-wracking, and a lot rides on those. So feel free to jump in with questions throughout any point in this presentation. It's a little bit more fun if you're interactive. If you want to stop me, let's chat about whatever it is. Starting with basics, diving in here, the most important thing you can do is get prepared. I mean, hopefully at this stage in the job search process, like you've gotten your resume together, you've got applications in, someone's given you a call, and we are to an interview phase. And really the other phases in kind of searching for a job, you kind of only need to be good enough to like move to the next step. And this is really where you're trying to do the sell yourself. And so basic interview tips, starting from the ground up. Before you walk into that interview, make sure that you are doing your research on the company. When you're job searching, it turns into its kind of own mini full-time job, and you get really lost in the sauce with how many applications you've filled out and which companies and how different is this job from that job. So even if you did pretty good research before you filled out the application for that position specifically, take a second, do a refresh research on your company. And make sure that you're using multiple venues for some of that research. Of course, if you know someone at that company or someone that used to work at that company, firsthand information is going to be a lot more valuable on getting someone's actual experience on what it's like to work there, what that company values. But check any and everywhere online. I mean, of course, there's the classics, going to LinkedIn, but also check out their website, check out their social media. What kind of things are they emphasizing and saying about themselves on their website? I always like to check social media because that's really what they're choosing, like whether or not it's what that company's actually like, it's what they're choosing to project into the world about the way that they run their company. So I always think that that's an interesting perspective that you should include in some of that research. Also, make sure you're researching your interviewers if you know who that's going to be. If there's an internal recruiter with that company or you're working with a third-party recruiter, they should know who you're interviewing with, or while you're scheduling it, you can ask. If you have that information, I highly, highly recommend going and doing a little bit of research on the people that you're interviewing with, at the very least to just learn their job titles if you can. Best place to do that is LinkedIn. I mean, hopefully the person setting up the interview is giving you that info of, hey, you're meeting with so-and-so, they're the hiring manager and the HR manager. Sometimes they don't though. If you just have names, LinkedIn is probably your best bet on finding that info, going to the company's page, and then there's always that little people section, and seeing if you can find the names to know exactly what that person did. And also, doing a little bit of research on their LinkedIn might help you find like things in common. Maybe you guys went to the same school, or have like a same like interest, or volunteer at similar nonprofits. It can just help you find little connection points that maybe you wouldn't have known prior to going in if you hadn't looked it up. Arrive early, but not too early. 10 minutes, I think, is about your sweet spot on like walking into the doors of the office. So, and if it's like a really big interview, sometimes and I've never been to that location or building or whatever before, do a drive-by the day before, see how long it takes you to actually like get there, and then it's like, what is the parking situation? Is it an easy just like park and walk in, or are you gonna have to park at a parking garage down the street and walk and not know where you're going and get a little lost? Because I do that. Early but not too early. I have had, back in the day when I worked at a larger company, every once in a while someone would show up like 30, 45 minutes early, and I was like, I don't have anything to do with you yet. And it puts almost a weird amount of pressure on the interviewer to kind of like rush whatever they're doing. Like they might have a meeting right up until then. So I think 10 minutes is about the sweet spot where, and you don't have too much time to like build up your own nerves. It's a little easier to like keep those tamped down if you need to like hang out in your car for a little bit and listen to your podcasts or music or whatever it is that's being soothing pre-interview. Bring extra copies of your resume. If you know exactly how many people you're interviewing with, bring that many copies plus one. That's either for yourself or for an extra person if they just like happen to grab some potential coworker to jump into the interview. If you don't know how many people, like 3 is a safe number of resumes to bring with you. At this point, it's a little old-fashioned, and you probably won't end up using that copy of your resume, but if they have not prepared and they don't have printed copies of your resume, it just makes you look prepared. It's the extra step, and you want to do everything in that interview to set up a positive impression. Your goal with the interview is to instill a lot of confidence in the people that are potentially going to be hiring you. Turn off your phone, super awkward when those go off. And I mean, everyone is pretty, at this point, like used to interruptions like that, but also like, just like airplane mode it, leave it in your car, whatever you need to do. No one's leaving it in their car these days, but like airplane mode probably. Your interview starts outside of the building. Literally every single person you walk past could potentially be best friends with the hiring manager for that position. And this absolutely extra includes whoever the receptionist, secretary person is checking you in at that front desk. We used to, in our office, that was my first question after every interview that I conducted, was I was checking in with our front desk person to be like, how were they? Like, did they seem nervous? Were they really nice? And if they were mean to you, I want to know about it because I won't be hiring them. Professional and conservative dress. We all love to be told how to dress. It's so fun. In tech, you can obviously get away with a little bit, there's typically a little bit lower of a dress code standard, but also if you're doing an IT job for a role that's not necessarily in a tech industry, it can be a little different. The expectations for that company might be different. Always play it safe. This is a SheCodes event. Men typically have a little bit of a more strict like set of rules on like, here is exactly what you can wear. Women's clothing, professional clothing, on the other hand, is really more up in the air. There's less strict rules, but there seem to be more like larger consequences for when you break whatever those weird unspoken rules are about what the professionalism level for that office is. So if you're in doubt, go a little bit more conservative, go a little bit more professional. Typically, if there is info on what that company's standard is, if it's like a business casual, or if it's casual, dress business casual. If it's business casual, dress professional. Go like one level up in professionalism from where that office's normal standards for a day-to-day are. So if everyone like wears t-shirts and you know that and you see that all over their social media, we're still not gonna like do that for the interview. Have you guys gotten into, do you guys have any questions about what to wear for interviews?
Kind of, yes.
Yeah.
What do we wear?
yeah, go off.
I don't know what to wear day to day.
Let alone for an interview. Fair enough. Because I mean, standards are pretty different now, especially with like COVID and everyone working from home. Most workplaces have become a little bit more relaxed. I would say some kind of collar. So if you've got like a collared shirt, or if you're going blazer, I love a blazer. That's just me personally, and you can get away with a little bit less formal of a shirt if you've got a blazer on top. So I mean, honestly, like a neutral shirt like this underneath a blazer, great. Long sleeve button up or just like kind of a dressier blouse. I know I said collar, but like this is probably too informal of what I'm wearing because it's got like some of the like fashion stitching and whatever. I'd go with something a little bit more plain, and then I wouldn't go jeans in any form. I would go slacks of some sort. You've got a lot of options with styles there. You don't have to wear heels, even if it's like kind of a professional office, as long as you've got like professional shoes, not wearing sneakers for the most part. It gets really complicated with women's wear. It's also very like not, with being well tailored and not distracting, like not like too oversized and not like too super tight, because that's one of those like weird unspoken rules that you're going to get penalized for if you wear, something that's kind of on either end of that spectrum. So well-tailored tends to have a much more professional look to it, and not distracting, no like huge statement jewelry or super bright, I don't know, makeup or colors or whatever. You can do a little bit, show your personality for sure, but you're kind of trying to play it safe. And if there's an aspect of your like outfit, like you wear a nose ring every day and you're like, I'm not gonna compromise, that like some people, I would recommend for the most part, it's like if you're really trying to nail that job, go as conservative as possible. But if it's like, hey, I'm not gonna cover this all the time, like this, this tattoo, or I wear these a lot, or whatever it is, if that's your choice and like, hey, if they won't hire me because of that, it's not the right fit for me, then that's a choice that you're walking into that interview making as well. What else? Yeah.
So several years ago, the kind of, if you really just didn't know, the always safe option was go with a suit, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
You can't go, is that still true?
Yeah, if it's relatively well tailored, I would show up for any interview in a suit, and it'll be a pretty safe bet. I think that you can either lose the blazer, or because when I think like women's suit, I'm thinking either like dress slacks and pencil skirt plus like white button up and a blazer. I think you can lose one element of professionalism and still be like set. So either losing the blazer and having like the nice slacks, nice shoes, button up, or you can lose the button up for something a little bit more casual and keep the blazer. And I think that that's kind of like where the level's at now for more professional companies. It's hard. There's a bunch of nuances to women's professional clothing. Also, you have a super cool resource of professional women in technology here that would love to, if you've got an interview coming up, holler at one of us. And I'm sure other people would be happy to like go through like, oh, here's what I wore, or like, here's what I did last time, or if you just want to run your outfit by someone. Yeah. Anything else, clothes-wise? It's weird and nuanced. Okay. All right, oftentimes, especially now, post-COVID, your first interview is not going to be in person, it's going to be virtual. Even if that first interview is really just like a 5-minute long phone interview with a recruiter who gave you a call because they got your resume, that's still a part of your like interview process. Because your resume and application gets you like semi-qualified, gets you in the door. That first phone call, you're trying to sell yourself, even if it's only a quick 5-minute one. So be prepared if you're applying for jobs and are kind of on the job search process, that answering the phone at any point in time could potentially be a new employer or recruiter or hiring manager that's calling you about a job application. As a recruiter, I can't tell you how many times someone answers the phone with like a weird and distressful tone, which is totally fine. I get it. I get a bunch of scam calls too. I understand. But then their tone changes the second that I say that I got their application for something or that I'm calling about a job. And I'm like, oh, I like this person better than the person I was talking to 2 seconds ago. So you want to make that your impression like right off the bat. And as a recruiter, I do not care if you screen my calls. If you like see that it's an unknown number and you don't answer and it goes to voicemail and you call me back 2 minutes later because you saw that you were interested in it, that doesn't bother me one bit. Do be aware that I will go to your voicemail and have your voicemail set up to A, be able to receive messages, sometimes they get full, and B, that it is something professional-ish sounding on your voicemail. Even if it's just the automated one that like reads off your number. But I do get a lot of like full voicemail boxes. And if you're job searching, people are going to be leaving those for you. When you're in specifically a phone interview, you don't necessarily have to do this for like a virtual Zoom interview, but it is a lot easier to read your tone over the phone than people think it is. And especially if you're like struggling or thinking of an answer or just like aren't super engaged, it's really easy to tell that in your voice. Back in the day, I actually had an internship at a radio station, and they would, when you did audio reads, make you plaster this ginormous smile across your face because it makes a difference when you're recording the audio for it. I actually used to have a little sticky note taped because of that to my phone for when I was on work phone calls that's like, hey, this matters. It's just a little smiley face sticky note. But if you're looking to infuse a little bit more confidence, a little bit more friendliness in some of those phone interviews. Do it standing up. I mean, pace around your house if you need to, and smile. I even, for candidates that are like I don't know, it feels kind of weird. A weird like hack you can do for it to make it feel more, I don't know, personable, is to do it in front of a mirror. Like you're on the phone with this person and standing virtually in front of a mirror, because you're being able to like read your own body language, and it conveys more of the messaging that you want it to convey. Test your technology beforehand. I think I'm preaching to the choir a little bit on this one, but if you typically use Teams and they're using Zoom, make sure you've downloaded it beforehand. 5 minutes before isn't the time to like be messing with it. Just make sure that you're checking. It's more about checking the details of that interview before you actually go into it, making sure you know where you need to be and what application you need to be on to be accessing stuff. Make sure your background on Zoom is clear, clean, and distraction-free. We're all pretty used to virtual meetings now. Most people have some kind of setup that they're using for that, although a lot of workplaces, depending on what your norm for virtual meetings is, will often have cameras off, so it's good to just do like a camera check, see what's behind you. Check your lighting levels, and it can be different at different points in the day. Now, like if you've got windows in different places, are you backlit at that time of day? Front lit, do you need to like set up a weird lamp in front of you? Whatever you need to do to like make it the best setup. It doesn't matter to me or to anyone else on that side of the camera if you couldn't find a good place to set it, so you stacked up 17 books and like made this weird tower to put your phone or laptop in. Whatever you need to do to like make it a good setup, go ahead and do that. One thing that ends up being really weirdly distracting in the background of virtual interviews is ceiling fans. People don't think about those a lot, but when they're on Zoom or like a FaceTime or whatever, when they're moving, it looks really weird and clippy, and it's very distracting. Anyway. And put the camera at eye level. Psychologically, that does, like, it's a little like psychology trick of it making it feel more personable. And when I'm on like big Zoom calls, especially if I'm accessing them on my computer, if it's like obviously if it's like a big work Zoom call that we're all used to, it doesn't necessarily matter as much. But when you're in an interview, you're trying to make them like you and feel personable and have a good like connection conversation. And so it's important to make it feel like you're making eye contact with them and make it feel like as normal of an in-person conversation, even if it doesn't actually feel that way. So I always take my little camera and I put my own picture right next to where the camera is, like right underneath there, because let's be honest, we're all just like looking at ourselves while we're on Zoom. We're not usually looking at the other people. So I will stick that right above or right underneath the camera, and then like anytime I'm checking that, it still feels like I'm making eye contact, like I'm not breaking the conversation there. Here are our examples. I made my coworkers take these pictures for me. This is Ryan on your right side here. Not a great angle. Taking it in your car is slightly acceptable if you let them know ahead of time, but do be really conscious of that. Of like, hey, I can only take it on my work break. I'm gonna have to be in my car for this. I wouldn't be in the car without giving them a heads up. And Talon over here, very conscious of lighting, nothing too distracting going on in the background. He's sealed off in a place where he's not going to get disturbed, and we can see his face clearly, so yay. All right, yes?
You mentioned having a clear background. What about like slightly blurring your background? Is that unacceptable?
That's totally fine.
Elizabeth, will you repeat that question?
Yes, I sure will. Layla asked if I mentioned having a clear background, if blurring your background is acceptable. Yes, totally. I would still make sure that you don't have any like big motion that's going to happen behind you, because you can like still see that in it and can be a little distracting. But yeah, totally fine. Don't go too crazy with like using a virtual background, but blurring, totally normal and acceptable. Cool. All right, interview prep tips 201. Beyond, we're a little past basic. If you're really wanting to kind of nail that next interview, get the job. That's the goal. A couple things that I would recommend doing as you're preparing yourself to answer questions, because that's what everyone gets really nervous about. What are they going to ask? Am I going to sound good? Am I going to trip over my words? A couple things that I would recommend doing, sitting down before the interview and reviewing the job description. I know you looked at it when you applied, and maybe you've even kind of looked over it in a little bit of prep for this interview. One thing that I would really recommend is maybe even printing it off if you can, or just pulling it up, looking it over, and we're making notes as we're going through the job description of things that are going to be the most relevant, and thinking about how you are going to show that you embody those things, how you can talk about those things. Because most people, when they're going through a job description, you're going, okay, yeah, I can do that. I'm familiar with that. I could do that. Yeah, I'm qualified for this job. I think that I would enjoy it. And that's about as far as like that goes. And then maybe they're reviewing it, but it's really more of they're kind of checklisting it in their brain. And I want you to go into some more specifics so that you can give some really good context during that interview. So as you're looking through the job description, make a focus list of your top relevant technical skills and soft skills. So technical is going to come first. Most of those job descriptions are going to have their preferred tech stack listed in there. They're giving you some examples and skills and qualifications that are referencing the tech stack that you are going to need in that position. So you're getting kind of an idea, and typically the ones that they're listing first are the ones that they use more often in that job. And there's always, whether or not they're listing it, the hiring manager in their brain needs to have experience with these technologies and prefers some of this other stuff as well. So sometimes the job descriptions separate those for you, sometimes they don't, and they're just kind of listed. So usually the ones that are coming first are like the necessary, here is what I need. So make a focus list of your top relevant ones and your soft skills, because they'll go through those. You're looking for action words on, within the job description, you're looking for action words like designed or implemented, or those are the kind of things that you want to be pulling out. And then soft skills, what's setting you apart in the things that are part of this job that are not tech stack? Are you going to have to collaborate with others? Are you going to be client facing at all? Like what are some of those other elements look like that are going to make you good at the job that are not necessarily the tech stack? And make a list of 3 or 4 of those that are going to be most relevant as you're reading the job description. Because you should have an idea of like what some of those top skills are for yourself just as a whole, as an individual. But look at the job description and write a 3 to 4 bullet point list on your strengths in those areas based on the job description itself, because those are the things you're actually going to want to talk about and give examples of in the interview. Prepare some project examples. And I don't necessarily mean like bring a whole like project with you to show them about what you've done. As you're going through the job description and you're looking at the skills that they're looking for, and you're like, okay, this person is going to have to analyze this from these types of databases and format things like that. As you're getting that information from the job description, be thinking in your brain, not just, oh, I can do that, oh, I've done that before. Pull in your brain from a specific project that you have worked on, and it's like, okay, I did that in this project. Take a second to give me the whole story, or to prepare the whole story of that project. That way you're ready to talk about it in the interview. So it's like, okay, yeah, I did database stuff in this particular position, and we did these things with it. Instead of just thinking of that, okay, what was the project? How long did it take? Where was I doing that at? What was the business problem that we were trying to solve with that? What was my role in that? What tech stack did I use? Kind of go through the whole story of what this project was in your brain. And that makes it a lot easier to spit back out a day or two later when you're trying to explain it to someone that you've never met before, and you're already probably pretty nervous. So giving the full story to yourself a couple days in advance is really helpful. Because our goal here is to create confidence in your aptitude. When you're just breezing through that job description and you're checklisting it of, yep, I can do that, yep, I can do that, yes, I'm qualified for this job, you know that you are, and maybe your friends and current coworkers know that you are. That hiring manager, they already think that you can do the job based on bringing you in for an interview. It's like, okay, the things that you've listed on your resume, you've probably got at least some of the skills that I'm looking for. Let's talk further. You want them to leave each question with full confidence that you can execute those things and that you have done them before. And creating good stories that you can give to them and good, clear examples of projects is going to create confidence in them. A good way to do that is knowing what business problem or thing that you're solving with each of those projects, because that gives you kind of an anchor point on, well, here's why we're doing it, and creates a better way to talk about it that shows that you understand the full picture of what your goals are with the things that you're working on. As you're answering questions, never talk negatively about past organizations, colleagues, or bosses. That one is a little hard because at some point in time, we have all worked for someone who is not ideal to work for, that was not a great workplace. Everyone has been there and understands those kinds of things. However, even if you are completely and 100% right about why you left that toxic workplace or why it wasn't a good fit for you, if you are the one that is giving me that negative perspective on a particular situation, I have only met you for, I don't know, the last 10, 15 minutes. Now we're 20 minutes into this interview, and I'm hearing negativity from you, which you could be 110% correct. Like, you could absolutely be right about that situation, but I don't have the perspective to know whether what you're giving me is 100% of the truth, or whether maybe you are the negative one and you're the problem. I just don't know you. I haven't met you. So I don't have anything to judge that against. So if there is something that is kind of relevant, that is, you're leaving a place because maybe it's not a great workplace to be at, or it wasn't a great team to be on, kind of a universal understanding of that in interviews is if you give me something positive that you are looking for, typically the person on the other side of that interview understands, especially if it's like emphasized, they understand that you're looking for those things because there is a gap in those things. Like, I'm looking for someone that fills this, like, that can do these things on my team because no one on my team can currently fill that gap. So if I'm looking for a really positive workplace with great work-life balance, I know that as your interviewer, you're leaving somewhere that does not have great work-life balance because that's what we're seeking out. So it's still, you sound positive when you're saying, this is what I'm looking for. I would have rather done this. When you have to talk about negative situations, try and be the positive spin on it. And it just makes you sound better and like a more positive person to be around. And it's going to make me want to work with you more than if I listen to a 5-minute long negative story from you, even if that's completely relevant and correct. Focus on how you'll benefit the organization. They have a job open because they need something. They have some sort of need, and they are opening that job and hoping that you will be able to fill that need. So as you're looking through that job description, you're preparing yourself, focus on what you're bringing into that team, into that organization. Are you awesome with clients and people, and you're really gonna be able to ramp that up? Are you awesome with these particular things? You're looking at what their gap is and how bringing you in is going to help fill that gap and be an asset to their team, because you will be an asset in some way, shape, or form. Know what that is, and once you know what that is, it's easier for them to see it because you're speaking to it with all of your answers a little bit. If you don't know it, it's going to be a lot harder for an interviewer to believe you or to be able to see that in you. Know your audience. I am a tech recruiter. I talk to tech people all day long. I know a fair amount. Please don't ask me to code a big project ever. It is not my jam. I can look at it a little bit. I kind of know what's going on. But also, people start to lose me in the weeds a little bit when they're going technical. And I can tell pretty much when someone knows what they're talking about when they don't know what they're talking about. But also at a certain point, getting that in the weeds with something is not going to give me any more information than like a shorter summary of that at a higher level would. You can spend 3 minutes on that answer, or you can spend 15 minutes on that answer. I'm gonna get the same information out of it because I just am not as technical as someone who's doing this every day, who does this as a career. So if you are speaking with an HR manager, a recruiter, someone that's in more of a, just kind of a different aspect of tech that isn't maybe in the same job that you're going into, tailor that answer to your audience a little bit. If you're talking to the hiring manager or a potential coworker or senior member of the team, great, get super technical with the questions. You might even be faced with different types of interviews. Like this interview is only with HR. They care about culture a lot. This is a culture fit interview. So know that you need to talk about your work experience in a way that speaks to them and shows more of your soft skills, your teamwork. Are you good with clients? Are you you're not good with clients, but you're a really good problem solver and you're able to take complicated stuff and figure it out. Whatever that is, finding a way to explain that makes sense to your audience. And that's why doing research on the company and who you're interviewing with beforehand is so important. Are you talking to a high-level executive leader? Because they're gonna wanna hear more about what business problems are you solving with your skills and like with your projects. If you're talking to someone in that team, they are going to want to get super technical. You do want to instill confidence in your skills, but that's going to come at different levels depending on who you're talking to. And write down your questions. I recommend writing down questions for the interviewers during the part of interview prep where you're doing your research. Typically, I mean, you can go online and find a bunch of lists of what questions to ask during an interview, and you'll find some good answers. Like there's questions on there that are great to take in with you. The best questions that I've ever gotten in interviews or that I've had feedback from hiring managers that they've gotten in interviews typically come from genuine curiosity. So I recommend when you're getting like that refresh as you prepare for the interview, taking about 45 minutes, doing a quick review of the job description, doing a review of that company, and as you're doing all of that, stop at about the 30, 45-minute mark and ask yourself, okay, what do I want to know more about? What do I need to know more about to see if I'm going to be a good fit or be excited about this job? What am I genuinely curious about? And that is typically where the best questions are going to come from. If they don't have a lot posted about their culture, maybe your questions are about their culture. If they have a lot posted about their culture, but that the industry that they're in is in a tough place, and that's what you're curious about is like, okay, well, how stable is this industry? Maybe those are your questions. Whatever it is that is actually going to help you make a decision on, is this company and this role a good fit for me? That's going to be the best questions that you could possibly ask them. That being said, I do recommend having just like a back pocket question that if you got completely caught off guard, you could just pull that out at the end of the interview, because they'll always end an interview with, do you have any questions for me? And the only wrong answer is, no, I think that's it. That's the only wrong answer. I mean, maybe if you threw questions in between, you can get away with that. But for the most part, that question is an opportunity for you to show that you have put thought into your potential role in the company and to impress them with the questions that you ask. It's just as important as any answer that you're giving them about the questions that they're asking you. So I recommend writing down 3 or 4 questions, and I think that it's totally fine to bring them like in a notebook with you and be like, oh, well, I wrote some down coming in today. Do you mind if I take just a second? Opening that up, I think that shows that you prepared and took a lot of time and thought and consideration into coming to this interview. You can also, I recommend bringing more than you need, because they will probably answer 1 or 2 of the things that you were going to ask in the interview as they're giving you info about the role. So you can always kind of like mark some out or not ask them or skip around, or just pick your favorite. Typically 2 or 3 are good to ask them during the interview. Do you guys have any go-to questions or that you've asked during interviews?
Every single interview I've ever done, I always ask them how they felt about my interview. If they had anything that stood out to them, or if they had anything that they thought maybe reflected, I don't know how I used to word it, but if they thought like how it reflected on me, so that I could use that going forward.
Okay, interesting. And some people, do you generally get pretty good feedback doing that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's been a time or 2 where I've just gotten a response of like, oh, I really like that question, like, I felt great about this interview. Like,
right, and they don't actually have,
right.
much.
But what I found is like it kind of turns it back on them in the sense of like, I'm thinking about like how am I gonna fit in here, and that includes how they feel like I fit in there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's an opportunity to get like, was there anything that you like want more context around? Like, how do you feel like this went?
That's happened a couple of times.
Yeah.
That they said, well, you mentioned this earlier, can you talk about this some more?
Yeah, because then you actually find out like what they're actually curious about. You have to be careful with how you word that question, because every once in a while I'll get a really ambitious candidate. It sounds like you asked that in an awesome way. Every once in a while I'll get a really ambitious candidate that asks that in kind of like a really excited, like aggressive way, and it's like, like, is there anything like that, you know, I need to like clarify, or that you're unsure about me for this job with? And it's like, okay, I'm not ready like for feedback yet. Like I don't, and it kind of like puts them on their toes in like a negative way. But I like the way that you do that.
I would say, what does success look like in this position? And then they can tell you all the things, and at the end, when you do your like recap, you can kind of throw in some of those words.
Yeah, absolutely. Or you can use them later in your thank you emails.
That's true.
Would you be able to repeat these questions?
Yes, I'm so sorry. That question was, what does success look like in this role? And were the questions that you ask interviewers at the end of the interview. I like that one a lot, and it gives you, the good context to kind of tie things in a little bit later.
And I feel like it gives them like the psychological positive thing too. So it's like they're thinking of all the successful things, and they're trying to connect them to you too, instead of like a negative, like I don't know. There's no room for negativity there.
Yes, yeah, gets them thinking about. I also like to. I love that question. I also will typically, every once in a while, phrase it as people who have been successful in this role before, what traits or skills made them really successful. And then they're even thinking about like those people and kind of like seeing if you have those same things. And then you're able to speak to them better of, oh yeah, I love getting to do those types of things, or my last boss said, whatever. Any other questions that you guys go to or like to use during interviews?
My favorite one I like to ask is, what is your favorite thing about working here? Because that usually opens up kind of a discussion for positivity, and it's like, oh yeah, I love like the coworkers, or maybe if they hesitate to even say anything positive, you probably know that's a red flag.
That's a flag.
Yeah, usually it's a very heartwarming, opening, humanizing question that I find.
Yeah, absolutely. And if they really do love working there, they're so excited to jump into their favorite things about working at that company, and you can tell that was an immediate answer that they jumped all over. Yeah.
On that humanizing note, one of the sometimes I like to ask is, it sounds a little silly, but I ask them if they didn't have to have the job, what would they be doing?
Ah.
You know? Not necessarily those words exactly, it just depends on how comfortable I feel in the environment and in the situation, but it lets me know a lot about what they're doing, what they think about the free time, and what they value, and if they're going to value, my free time, and the things that I'm into, and there's a level of sincerity that I feel like I get in that kind of a situation. That, I think it catches us all off guard.
Yeah.
Like if I feel brave enough in the moment to ask that question.
Yeah.
If it's something that if I'm in a place where I'm feeling like I'm leaning towards wanting to be there, I really want to know the people that I'm going to be signing up for, and I feel like that also opens up just a different conversation about more, like tell me why you like
non-work things. Yeah. Yeah. For a virtual audience, she asks if they weren't doing this job, what would they be doing? Yeah. Super, super good to get outside of that work bubble a little bit and get into their values if you're going to like working there. Cool. Also, and writing down questions is also a good way to show off that you researched. I mean, you can even throw in a little, I saw that on social media you guys volunteer with the regional food bank. Is that something you guys do super often? Do you set like employee time aside to go volunteer with whatever? Like you can reference things that you saw online, or hey, I saw you guys just signed a contract with, this other company, or just formalized a partnership in this area, and that gives you the opportunity to ask. I mean, make it a genuine question that you actually want to know the answer to, not just like, I did my research. But it is a good way to like throw that in of like, hey, I came prepared, I did my research. Also, I have questions about that. Cool. Awesome. Our favorite interview questions. So when you're getting into interview questions, and this will be kind of some of the basic ones that you're going to get asked in any interview from any interviewer, but there's always kind of that level of what's the question under the question? Like, why are they actually asking me this, and what information are they wanting from me? Does anyone know what the first question you get asked in 80% of interviews is? Tell me about yourself. Absolutely. It is the first question that everyone gets, and it is the easiest to not prepare for. No one really prepares for the question, tell me about yourself, for the most part, because you're an expert on yourself. You know everything that there possibly is to know about yourself. You can give them any information that they want. Yeah, you've got it down. But then they're like, tell me about yourself, and you're like, my entire life and however many years I've lived, just like word vomited into one answer. And it doesn't give them a whole lot of direction. I think it's nice to throw in like fun stuff about like your dog or family or whatever, but also those things do not help me know if you're gonna be a good fit for the job. Or people will give me like, well, like I lived like here and now I live here with my like husband and 5 cats and we're planning on building a house and I'm like, okay, like cool. But also, I was kind of like asking about your jobs and like your interests and like your career. So that is a question that's easy to skip over, but if you prepare for it, you are starting that interview off on a really good note, on a really good foot. And what we want to do with the question, tell me about yourself, is give the interviewer the things that you want them to know about you and that you want them to ask more about. You're kind of setting the stage for it a little bit. So I think it's totally appropriate to go in chronological order a little bit. Maybe talk about like where you went to school, your degree, give kind of the background, like, hey, I have a background in construction and then I went back to school for data analytics and now I'm working as this particular role, doing these types of projects, using these tech stacks that hopefully we already know are relevant to that particular job. And here are the things, and the thing that I want you to end on with tell me about yourself is looking towards the future. So what is the next thing I'm going to be doing in my career? What are you excited about working on? What is the next step for you? So that's the direction you want to steer that question into. And if there's something particularly that you work on, like you're involved in Techlahoma, or you have been doing a little bit of this in your job, but also you have like this side thing that you're doing that is going to be really relevant to this next job, make sure that you're throwing that relevant information into tell me about yourself, and that you're practicing it a little bit so that it comes out smoothly. You can sit down and like bullet point this a little bit of background in this, degree in this, or background in this, 7 years experience in software development, 3 of the last years have been managing a team of however many people. Here's a little bit about the projects that we work on. I want to move towards larger projects that are using this tech stack or that are working with companies in these industries because we did a little bit of this and I found it really interesting and I want to do more of it. That gets me really excited about you, and you want to make sure that that forward-looking thing is also like relevant to this job. Typically you want that forward-looking thing. Hopefully you're applying for a job that is meeting some of your needs in your career and the ways that you want to grow. Hopefully there's something exciting about this job that you're interviewing for that you can put into that in the future I'm passionate about, or I'm excited about doing these things. And they're going to be like, oh, we do some of that. That's going to like light them up a little bit. Is this a question that you guys typically prep for or have prepped for? So. Okay, good. It's an easy one to stumble around in. Even for people that do it all the time or that have done it previously and now their answer is different because they're at a different spot than the last time that they interviewed for a job. What are your strengths? Literally just any and every interview for the most part in an interview process, you're gonna get these questions. Knowing your strengths is really important because if you don't know what your strengths are, your interviewer is never gonna figure that out. Even if you're giving me kind of like a halfway answer on what your strengths are, I need you to know with like your entire chest what your strengths are and why you're gonna be good at this job. When people tend to get in trouble with this question a little bit because they know the things that they're maybe good at, but they're not prepared to give this answer with confidence, and that's really the key to this question. It's less about the things that you pick as your strengths, and it's more about the way that you choose to talk about them. Because if you're delivering that answer with confidence, I am gonna believe that you are really good at those things. People tend to get in trouble because they'll be like, well, I've worked with SQL for a long time, and I like doing this, and I'm really kind of good at bringing the team together. And they look at me, as the interviewer, and I'm like, and they're like, am I done answering the question? I'm like, I don't know, are you done answering the question? You tell me, did you have more strengths? Do you not have more strengths? They're looking at me to kind of give them permission to like, oh, okay, that was enough answers for me to write down. Thanks, but that answer sounds a lot different when they're like, well, I've been working with SQL in these ways, and I've done these types of projects with it, and I've gotten really good, especially in these elements. And I've done a little bit of this as well, and this, is a thing that I've super enjoyed working on, and I just got up to speed super quickly with these softwares. Also, I would say one of my strengths is that my team tends to lean on me when it comes to problems in this specific area, and we need to really collaborate. They do a good job of coming to me, and I feel like there have been some instances where I've really been able to help us come up with something creative that works for both this side of the team and that side of the team. There's a period on the end of that sentence. Like you can hear the period versus the ... And the end of that sentence sounds a lot different and makes a really big difference, really just in delivery, and it's about the same answer. Like the bullet points that they took on strength might be exactly the same bullet points for both of those answers, but they feel differently about the way that you answered it. The flip side of this, everyone's favorite question in the world is, and your weaknesses? How about those? How about the flip side of this?
Are you technically supposed to make it, are you supposed to humble brag? Or is that like, because that's what people tell you, right? Don't actually tell them that you're a bad teammate.
Right, don't actually tell them. Okay, so are you supposed to humble brag is the question there. Because you hear like, we'll tell them like, I'm a perfectionist and I work too hard and I don't know when to stop working. Personally, it's so hireable. I'm just like too good of an employee and people have to promote me. It's a problem. I don't love those answers. That's, okay, so the plus side of answering like, I'm a perfectionist, I work too hard, or like humble bragging a little bit is like, okay, so you did prepare for that question, I guess, and that's good, but also answers like that are a little bit of a humble brag they don't show a lot of self-awareness, and they don't show a lot of you knowing yourself and your own working style, and so it comes off like you are supposed to brag on yourself during an interview. Do not get me wrong, it's kind of weird socially to like brag on yourself in some of these ways, especially it's a little bit harder for women to do that, especially in male-dominated fields, but like this is the opportunity for you to brag on yourself. This is not the question for that. The question under the question of what's your weaknesses, it's do you understand yourself, your working style, how to ask for help? Do you understand how to manage yourself? And so the best answers here are going to show self-awareness. You want to avoid shooting yourself in the foot. If I'm interviewing an accountant and they tell me they're bad at math, I'm not hiring that accountant. If I'm hiring, a database administrator, don't tell me that you aren't, great at whatever specific skill thing or whatever it is that you need for that job. Like, don't list something that is so fundamentally important to the job as your weakness that you're not gonna, or like, I never get along with teammates. Like, okay, all right, you will have at least one teammate, so let's maybe not use that as your weakness. So you do want it to be, but you don't want it to be like so like humble braggy that it's like, okay, I don't believe you. Like that's kind of a cocky answer because it is a little bit and it doesn't come off the best. The best answers have some level of self-awareness and they have two parts to it. So you have the first half of the question, which is a honest or semi-honest evaluation of maybe a point where you are not the strongest. And then the second half of that answer is how you handle that weakness. Because I'm more than like knowing that you're not so great at this one particular thing. Like I am a very big picture person. And I even use this in my strengths. When I answer this personally, I use this in my strengths of I am a big picture thinker. I am good at, looking at the big vision of things. And so for me, sometimes that means I am not awesome at the like ittle bitty details and having to do like super specific like admin work. Like there's a bunch of like big stuff that I do, but then it all has to like go in and be documented. And for me as a person, I have to put dedicated time on my calendar at the end of every day and then at the end of every week to catch up on all of the documentation for that day that I have missed because it is not my strong point. And if I do not put that on my calendar, it does not get done and it's an important part of my job. So I am showing both that like, okay, here's what I'm good at, but the flip side of that is this other thing that doesn't always go so well, but I know it's important, and so here's how I do it. Here's what I do about that. A great answer, if you kind of like want a cop-out answer, is public speaking, because not a lot of people are great at public speaking, or if your answer is kind of relatable, that can be helpful. But if part of your role is to be a little bit of the face of the company or the team or present to executives a lot, that's not going to be an awesome answer. So it really depends on what the role is, but the best ones show self-awareness. Does anyone have good ones that they've used for that?
Self-confidence.
Okay.
It was criticism, not criticism, but in a review and what is your weakness, or from somebody getting, a recruiter or somebody asking a former employer, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is this individual's weakness? And it was, she could use a little more self-confidence.
Could use more self-confidence, yeah.
And at first, that's such a gut punch, right? But
Mm-hmm.
it's true. And the way I dealt with that is I really listened and I asked him, I was like, what does that look like to you, right? So what am I
Mm-hmm.
doing?
That's showing you
That's
that.
showing you that.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I really would like it if you stopped saying negative things about yourself
Mm-hmm.
and your ability,
Mhm.
because you're getting things done. And that was huge for me. And I did. I worked at not saying those negative or even self-deprecating jokes, right? Like
Yeah.
I didn't even give myself that permission for a little bit. And it really did focus my attention on the job at hand
Mm-hmm.
and not
your own abilities, yeah.
my negative, like my deficiencies, but focusing on what was actually accomplishing.
Yeah. Yes. To summarize that. No, you're totally fine. In answer to the weaknesses question, that self-confidence piece, and being able to, hearing that from a manager is like, oh no, what's standing out to you that's affecting my work, that you are noticing that, and finding the ways to not focus on that, to focus on some of the more positive aspects of that. Sorry, that was a great tidbit, and I butchered summarizing that, but I love the interaction. If you are prepping for an interview and you're like, I don't really know that I know what my strengths and my weaknesses are, because I think that we all go through periods in our careers and in our lives where we feel like we do really know what our strengths and weaknesses are, and periods where it's like that's a little bit more amorphous. Turn to the people around you, turn to a trusted coworker or colleague or former coworker or friend, and ask them what they think your strengths are. Especially like coworkers are like, see, what are they always like asking me about? Like, where do they get stuck and then they come ask me for help? Because that's probably saying something about my strengths. So start to notice that even just in their behavior, but also you can ask them. And your friends are pretty good at knowing about what those things are about you too. If you really trust this person or friend or person in your life, you can ask them what your weaknesses are and be ready for a very real answer sometimes. But that can help shed a little bit of light on that. Okay, another typical one. Why are you interested in this company / role? Money. You guys like have healthcare benefits, and like I need to go to the doctor. The question under this question is like, do you actually care about this role, or will you be gone soon? Or just like, is this actually in your skill set? Are you actually interested in whatever this job is? Because you would be surprised how many people I talk to on a daily basis for any number of types of roles that don't actually seem interested in getting the job that they've applied for that I'm talking to them about. And I'm like, okay, well, I mean, that's cool. You don't have to take it. So coming up with a reason that is better than just money. We love money. That's on everyone's priorities list. But you want to find a couple of things that are going to show that you will be invested in this job and that this is interesting and a benefit for you. So find something that isn't money or benefits related. You can talk about it being a culture fit. This is going to allow you to have better work-life balance, or maybe it's going to gear your career in a direction industry-wise. Maybe you're going to get to use these things that you know, but also learn this other skill set. Like whatever it is that is genuinely interesting to you about this role, or like you guys work with really cool clients. I saw that you worked with so-and-so and so-and-so. I would love to do work on a larger scale than I'm doing it right now. Like that's what I'm super excited about in this next role. Just to find like one like genuine thing that isn't the paycheck to tell them. And then it kind of goes hand in hand with what are your long-term goals. The question under the question is this a stepping stone for you? Especially if you're applying at like a really well-known company or a very like super cool tech thing at like the forefront of whatever their field is, using the latest technologies. It's like, okay, are you actually really interested in this job? Will you be here to grow, or are you just going to be here for a year or two and like peace out to the next coolest thing? Or are you just trying to get, if you're applying at Google, like, do you just want that on your resume? And then like you're going to go somewhere else pretty soon. And even if you totally are just planning on using it as a stepping stone, don't tell them that. What are your long-term goals? It's also setting you up. I will get people every once in a while that are like, well, I want to open like my own tech shop, or I want to be an entrepreneur and open my own business doing this. And I'm like, I do think that that's genuinely really cool, and I would love to sit down over coffee with you and have a conversation about whatever that is. As a hiring manager, don't tell them that in 5 years you're going to peace out and start your own business that may or may not be related to the business that they're in. They're like, oh, okay, so like you're not invested here. And that's not super uncommon. Like no one stays in a job forever. People don't stay at the same company for 40, 50 years now and then like get their retirement package all from like that one company. And that's pretty common as far as career growth goes. But it's also a way to say that like, at the very least, this next role that you're hiring for, this next step, is taking me one step closer to where I want to be. So in the long term, I would like to manage a team of people doing this exciting work. This is going to help me get XYZ experience so that I can do that. And maybe I could do it at your company if it works well enough. Did I? Okay.
I was kind of just like asking for an example of like what you would say to like if you don't necessarily want to stay there, but you want to like give a good answer.
If you don't want to stay there, but you want to give a good answer, yeah, then you're giving the long-term vision, and the role that you're applying to should add some value that shows that you will at the very least be invested in this next role because it's teaching you a skill that you want to learn. Or, hey, I want to be a full stack developer. I've only done front end and I've done X amount in back end, but like I really want to grow in that end. So I'm applying for this full stack so that I can spend more time doing this back end stuff. And so then you're not selling your soul and signing a contract and promising that you will be their full stack developer once you've done this back-end stuff, and then you move into full stack, and then you manage a team. You're not promising all of those next steps in your career to that person, but if that's where you want to be, they're like, oh, good, you'll get to do some of that here. And typically, if you're giving them something good, they're like, oh, you're going to get to work on projects that are with the healthcare industry so that you can continue to do this stuff in the healthcare tech space or whatever. Like, they will typically jump in and give you some of those selling points that are like, they're now selling you on the company a little bit. Why should we choose you? I almost moved this to another slide. This is in this basic interview questions slide. You probably won't get, every once in a while someone gets asked this very directly, like, why should we hire you for the role? Why are you a good fit for the role? But whether or not that company asks you why they should choose you, I want you to walk into the doors of that interview knowing why you are the best fit for that job. Because there is some reason, something unique in your background, something that you are really good at that is going to make you a great hire for them. It's like maybe you're interviewing 20 people, I'm the best one that you're going to hire. maybe I don't have as much experience in this software, but I've done something similar. Maybe I, this or that, but tell you what, I'm gonna outwork everyone else that applies for this job. You're not gonna regret hiring me because I'm an awesome collaborator and I'm gonna help our team get goals done. Like there is something in there that, or maybe you are like the foremost expert and this like best person at doing this particular thing that this role is gonna be tackling. There's some reason that they should be choosing you for that job because there's a reason you applied for it. So if you know that you are the right answer to their problem, to this gap in their team, that's going to help them know it. And it's a lot easier for them to see that when you know it because you're able to like weave it through all of your answers a little bit. Behavioral interview questions. Show of hands, how many of you guys have gotten these behavioral interview questions where they're like, tell me an example of, tell me about a time when. Yeah, you get these a lot. These are the hardest questions to prepare for. I find that these are the hardest ones to like come up with on the spot because typically they're asking you for a very specific example and story of when you have done this in the past. And hiring managers tend to ask these types of questions because the best indicator of future behavior is past behavior. If you get into conflicts with coworkers in the past, you're probably gonna do it again in a future job. If you're not able to complete a project on time previously, you probably will struggle with that a little bit in the future. So they are trying to get a feel for what it's like to work with you because we sit down in these interviews and we get to know each other a little bit and we're like, okay, like theoretically, it's all kind of like theoretical. And we're all kind of like giving our best versions of ourselves. This is really like, okay, I'm trying to imagine working with you. What's that like? What do you like to work with on a daily basis? These are the questions that are going to help them get to those things and assess specific skills. They're also really freaking hard to come up with on the spot because you're very nervous and you're worried about like putting your best foot forward and thinking on your feet about the perfect story to tell them about your experience is really, really hard. These are a couple examples of behavioral interview questions. Tell me about a time you creatively solved a problem. When you disagreed with a decision that got made on your team, when you needed to step up, take initiative. Tell me about a time when you made a mistake in the workplace. How do you handle that kind of stuff? I recommend setting aside a little bit of time and creating your internal portfolio in your brain of your own success stories. So this can be a particular project or a particular day at work that was like either challenging or like really highlighted some of the things you do well, where you struggled or you succeeded. Come up with these success stories in your brain that you're like, yeah, if I were telling someone about this thing that happened at work, they would think that I was probably pretty good to work with, or that like I'm pretty competent, or that I'm good on a team. Like whatever those things are that are showing off your skill sets, start to create these success stories in your mind. And if you come up with like 3 or 4 of them that kind of paint you in a good light, you can use different stories based on the question that they asked you. If the story about creatively solving a problem is also one where you had to step up and take initiative, then depending on which question they asked you, maybe you're telling the same story, but you're pulling different details out of it to give to that interviewer to answer their question directly. So even when people are on Zoom, I recommend like creating the story in your brain and then coming up with a title for that story, and then like writing on a sticky note the 4 titles of your success stories. And as you're looking at the job descriptions, you can almost even tell what types of behavioral questions you're gonna get because of the skill sets that they're listing. If they want creative problem solvers who think outside the box and can work independently, you're gonna get questions like, tell me about a time you had to work on a project independently. Tell me about a time you had to step outside the box to think about a solution differently. So walk through the skill sets that they're asking for on job descriptions and come up with success stories in your mind. And then if you need to spin those stories to pull different details out to show different aspects of it, it's a little easier to do that once you kind of have the framework of that day. The kind of method for answering these questions is called the STAR method. And that is just the way that we format the story so that we do not get lost in the details. Because if I'm a talker, I don't know if you guys can tell, I've got a lot of words that come out of my mouth very quickly. But I will get lost in the details of a story, and I will start telling you about this other coworker and this other thing that was happening at the same time, but it's not actually emphasizing my point on the problem-solving piece of it, or on, you know, the analytical side of it. Like, those details that I'm spewing out are not actually helpful. So the STAR method helps us format the question, or the answer to the question, in a way that makes it an actual story and makes sense. So you're giving me the situation, S in STAR, so the circumstances or state of events. Where were you? What job was this in? What was your role? What was going on at that moment? And task. And situation and task often kind of get lumped into one bullet point. Sometimes it's easily explained, sometimes they are separate bullet points. But task is like, we were working on, you know, this specific software project. It took us a year. Here is the piece that we were at in this time frame. And then action is, what was your role in whatever it was happened? So here's just the general task. Either I was asked to do this or my team was asked to do this. Action, here is what I did about it. And then result, were the clients super happy? Did you fail at that one thing, but you learned a good lesson, and the next time you were able to nail it, or you did better? Like, what was the ending result of that, or future results of the story that you're telling me? And this keeps you from getting like lost in the details. You can kind of hit the points and know when to end your story. That's what I've got on behavioral interview questions. That's a long one though, and they're hard to come up with. They will probably also ask behavioral questions-ish that are around technical skills. Like, tell me about a project where you had to work with Jira, or tell me about a project where you used, you know, this tech stack or this specific software. And so you kind of want to do the same thing. Okay, well, I was working at this place, and the projects that we worked on with it were these types of projects. That's the task. My specific role in that team, like, I did a little bit of everything, or I was this particular role, or we used it about 40% of the time when working with those projects. And there's less of a result for that, but you can kind of speak to whatever your skill level is with those things. But you can use this to format other answers too. Have you guys ever heard of the STAR method before? Yeah. Okay, cool. I'm glad it's not like super brand new. But it is hard to answer stuff like that. And you can go online, like, as an interviewer, I have seen people in companies before go through and they're like, okay, like, I need to make sure this person has a good attention to detail, and they're typing in behavioral questions, attention to detail, and they're just like picking like one of their favorites and they're throwing that into their interview thing. So you can Google like what common behavioral questions are for problem solving or resiliency or whatever, and then think through some of your success stories. And it's like, okay, can I use my success stories that I've thought of to answer these types of questions? And if you can figure that out, then you know you've picked some good ones. Cool. A big part of interviewing is quieting your nerves. We all get really nervous. When I was younger in my career and I used to go to interviews, I would literally black out. I would walk out of that interview and I didn't know what I said. I couldn't tell you what they asked. I think it went well. Couldn't tell you what they asked. So it's going to be a thing. And it's honestly, like, if you're not a little bit nervous, then like, it's weirder if you're not nervous for an interview. That typically means it's a good interview and like a good job that you're excited about. So first tip, look good, feel good. If you are feeling good about the outfit that you're in, you make sure that you've done what you need to do for your hair to look good and you're not gonna rush. I want you to like feel confident in the way that you're presenting. If you're like so-so about your outfit, like find something that you feel comfortable and confident in and you're like, yeah, I look good, feeling comfortable. Don't wear something that's like, I don't know, that you're gonna be thinking about or fidgeting with the whole time, because then I can tell that you're not feeling comfortable and confident. It's just the person across from you is just trying to figure out if they wanna work with you. Are you gonna be a good coworker? If they're, a team lead, or they're like, okay, are you gonna be a pain to work with like the last guy, or are you actually gonna be competent in these skills? Am I gonna have to carry your workload? Or, are we actually gonna kind of have fun? Like, I kind of like your sense of humor. Like, they're making judgments based on, can I work with you on a daily basis? Would that be good? Would that be fun? And you're asking the same thing of them. You're trying to figure out if you're going to like working with them too on a daily basis. And this is what I talked about a little bit earlier. Know that you are the best hire that they could possibly make. You're going to care more about the subject matter. Maybe, the cause of the company is something you're really excited about. Maybe the industry is something that you've got like a special interest in. Why are you the best hire that they could possibly make for this job? Have it in your brain before you walk in the doors. And the hiring manager, the recruiter, the team members, everyone that is talking to you in this interview process, no one wants to have an open spot on their team. No one likes taking time away from their projects to go do interviews. No one wants that position to be open. And they want you to come in and blow their socks off and be the answer to all of their prayers and be the most amazing hire. Everyone in that process wants you to succeed. They want you to be the answer. Even when it feels like that person is throwing you some real hardball questions and they are trying to scare you off a little bit, they hope that you nail those hardball questions. They hope that that doesn't scare you off and that you actually are the right fit for that job. Like, people are cheering for you to be the fit that they need. Finish all of your interviews strong. Ask them about next steps. If you forget to do that in the interview, contact the HR manager or the recruiter and say like, hey, when should I expect to hear something? That way you know when to follow up, because it can be weird if you're following up like too soon, or it's like, okay, well, I waited too long. Should I have heard something? If you make sure to ask them when you should hear something, that's kind of peace of mind on, okay, I don't have to follow up for another week. Or they said they would get back to me before the end of next week. And then if you don't hear from them, then you feel a little bit more comfortable being like, hey, recruiter, I didn't hear anything. Like, do we know what next steps are yet? Clear anything up that needs to be addressed, kind of like that question. If you feel like there's something you want to circle back around to, or you were talking, you had a question earlier, you talked a little bit about the job. If you want to circle back around to that thing, go ahead and do that before the end of the interview. It's like, hey, it seems like you guys do a lot with this. I also wanted to make sure that you knew that those projects also included those types of things, and so it made me excited when you said that, so I wanted to make sure that you knew. You can totally circle back around to stuff that you need to. And if you want the job, tell them. People want to work with people that are excited to be there. No one wants to drag you into work and have you not have a good time. Like, if you're excited about the job, let them know. I have actually, as a recruiter with a client, had a client not offer someone a job because it was like, yeah, like he seemed really good, but he just didn't really seem like he was excited about the job, and that cost him a job offer. He was really sad. He was very excited about the job, and we tried, and I couldn't fix it. But that was just something that hiring manager and that team was really like, they looked for that specifically in interviews. Not everyone looks for it quite that specifically, but it is a consideration point. And at the end of the interview, show appreciation. If you can, get a business card. That makes it easy to send the follow-up info. Thank the receptionist. Thank anyone that had anything to do with it. Send a thank you note. If you want to go old school, sit down and write them in your car before you leave the parking lot, or in your car once you're in your driveway at home. These don't happen a whole lot anymore, but like if it's kind of a drawn out interview process for a more senior position, that can sometimes help you stand out. It's an option, but I do always recommend sending a thank you email. If you don't have if you left without asking for a business card and you only have the recruiter's contact info, email them anyway and say, hey, would you please pass this along to Sandra who interviewed me? I would really appreciate it. And then put your thank you email down there. And I do recommend having an application tracking list because, again, it gets really repetitive and lost in the interview, job search process. You apply for a lot of jobs. So write down, okay, they said it would take 1 week to make a decision. Interviewed on this date, they said it would take 1 week to make a decision. And then when you can't remember those details, they're all there for you. That is all I have for you. Do you guys have any other questions that I can answer?
How long should the thank you email be?
Thank you emails, maybe 2 paragraphs long, I think is about appropriate. It really depends on how personal the interview was. If there's something specific you want to mention, then get into it. But honestly, a quick thank you, hey, Sandra, I really appreciate your time in talking to me about the XYZ job. I'm really excited to bring these elements and doing the work that you said your team is doing with these new clients or these new projects. I can't wait to hear from you further. thanks. Like even just like a little baby quick one like that is better than none. Yes.
What do you think the optimum time to send the thank you email is? Like right after the interview, or should you wait 24 hours?
Okay, question is optimum length of time before you send a thank you email. I think, doing it the second you get home is probably like not ideal. I would not wait longer than 24 hours. If it was in the afternoon, then I would say before noon the next business day. You can totally send it after hours. People know that you're job searching. That's not inappropriate, but you can also schedule send it for like the next morning at 8 a.m. so it hits their inbox first thing. If you interviewed in the morning, then probably before the end of their business day, so they're getting that and they can consider that. I would typically say same day unless it's like very end of the day and then early the next morning.
We actually had a question back in chat regarding video calls that asked, what about how acceptable are backgrounds that are completely virtual, like a mountainside? Are those good for video calls?
A mountainside? I like that we're choosing something scenic. For an interview, I don't love a silly background. I do on like a Teams call or a call with my friend, like please put something silly in the background, like that's super fun. Not for an interview. I think you can probably get away with like a landscape. You could. It's not my first choice. I would go with either like no background or blurry background before I would do that. Any other chat ones? Okay. Cool.
I have one more question
Okay.
about the thank you. So a lot of interviews, you have multiple people you're interviewing with. When you write your thank you email, who do you choose to direct it to usually? HR or?
So question is, when there's multiple people in the interview, who are you directing the thank you email to? So if it's a little tricky, but typically the hiring manager, if you have business cards for all of them, you can write them all an individual thank you email, even if it's worded the same and then you just change the name, that's okay. It's a little bit better if you can make it personalized. If you asked, what's your favorite thing about working at this company, and Jenny jumped in and answered that, but like the others gave answers to other things, maybe in Jenny's you're saying, thank you for talking about your experience doing this thing at the company was your favorite. I really liked hearing about that. If you can make it a little bit personable, that's like extra nice. If you're only gonna send one though, to either the hiring manager or to the recruiter to pass along to hiring manager and team, you can do like Sandra and your team. Like, please thank your team for me for sharing what types of projects you guys are working on. You can put that in there without necessarily sending them all an email.
Position I'm interviewing for right now, I had a panel interview and I just sent one thank you and put them all on the email. Is that bad?
No, that's fine. Panel interview, put them all on the thank you email and just like sent one with multiple recipients. I think that's totally fine. They all know that they were also there in the interview. It's not a secret. Yeah. Cool. All right, well, I appreciate y'all's time today. Thanks for coming out. This was fun. Bye, y'all.